So, everyone, this is David Hornick. He's from August Capital. David specializes in quite a bit of tech companies, and he's also you're teaching at Harvard, correct? Right now, Harvard Business and Law.
Depending on a week, sometimes Harvard, sometimes Stanford. Actually, at the moment, neither. My wife made me stay home.
Nice. So yeah, we're excited to have you.
Awesome. Well, so my sense is that you want to get an overview of the venture capital world.
Yes.
Is there anything in particular that would be helpful that folks would like me to talk about? I'm perfectly happy. I sadly could talk at length about pretty much anything. The only question is whether I actually know anything about it.
Best things to do before approaching a venture capitalist?
The best thing to do before approaching a VC, all right? Here, I'll type these out. I'll give myself some notes
Let's get
here.
some questions going.
Yeah. You guys are more than welcome to ask questions.
Yeah, just fire away.
Common mistakes when presenting to a venture capitalist.
Common mistakes, all right?
Anyone else?
Anything else in advance?
Identifying the proper venture capitalist to approach.
Yeah.
Finding the right VC, if there is such a thing.
I'm thinking in terms of, as in your instance, a technology side of things versus construction versus whatever and that type. And then it's the round peg in a round hole.
So what, in other words, what kinds of things does a particular VC invest in?
Yeah.
Correct. And identifying that.
One of the biggest questions I have is what's going to happen when the bubble bursts with the 125 unicorns that are out there right now.
If there is a bubble.
Oh, there's
If
definitely.
there is a bubble.
Yeah, if there is a bubble. Overvaluation, I guess you could call it.
And
What about all this unicorns? All right.
what is a common, I guess, rule of thumb when evaluating a company as far as how much it is worth? If there is one. One.
How to evaluate a company from a valuation standpoint. All right. All right. All right. Good. I could probably talk to those things. Let me.
I got one more.
Yeah.
How did you? I'm not sure. How did you become a venture capitalist? How did you? Just curious.
Good. I was going to start with that. Right?
Okay.
Because it's the easiest thing to talk about, which is me, because it's the thing I know probably the most about. Anything else?
Start with that.
All right.
Yes, that's good.
Cool. So feel free to interrupt or whatever at any point. And if the sound is crappy or whatever, let me know. I'll try and fix it. So I'm David Hornick. I have now been at August Capital as venture capitalist for the last 15 years. So I guess that means I'm officially a venture capitalist. I spent many years thinking to myself, boy, it'd be amazing if I could be a VC. That'd be a great job if I could get it. And then for a period of time, I thought to myself, wow, this is an amazing job if I can keep it. And I guess that's still the motive. I mean, the reality is that the venture business, the good news and bad news of the venture business is that it's an incredibly easy business to measure how well you're doing, right? There are lots and lots of jobs in which you do a set of things and it's like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, you're good at this, you're bad at this based on a bunch of subjective criteria. And in the venture business, there are a set of criteria that help kind of figure out, how are you doing? Are you doing well? Are you meeting the right entrepreneurs? Are you seeing the right sorts of things, et cetera, et cetera? But all of those things need to roll up into one criteria, and that is ultimately how many dollars do you invest and how many dollars come out of the companies. And if the number that comes out is smaller than the number that went in, you're a terrible venture capitalist. And if the number of dollars that come out is slightly more than the number of dollars that went in, you're a mediocre venture capitalist. And if the number of dollars is meaningfully larger, then you're a good venture capitalist. And I find that in many ways the most frustrating piece about the venture business, because there are a million things I do every day, and they all probably have something to do with the likelihood that I succeed ultimately, but not necessarily, right? There are some VCs who invest in something and they get very, very lucky and it turns out to be an amazing company and therefore they're a genius. And there's some incredibly good venture investors who have worked really hard and are really smart and made very good, have been very helpful in all of those things, but they made a set of choices that didn't work out, and therefore they are bad venture capitalists, independent of how smart and how hard they've worked and all of those things. So it is a tricky business where how hard you work is not necessarily going to be the measure of how successful you are. It can help, but it doesn't necessarily make you successful, and that sucks. Because, and I like the fact that if I work harder, that I might be successful, because I've always been willing to work harder. I've always been willing to sleep a little less in order to succeed, and get in the venture. And when I was an attorney, that was more than sufficient to make me a good attorney. People would say, "Hey, can you do this or whatever?" And I'd say, "Sure," and I'd work over it all night, and I'd get them whatever they were looking for, and they go, "Oh, thanks," and therefore they appreciated that I was a good attorney. But in the venture business, if I stay up working all night, it doesn't guarantee anything. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be successful. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be perceived as successful. It just means that I've put in a set of work that to try and be helpful and look at new companies and all those things. So let me back up a second, because the question was, so how do you become a VC? A totally reasonable question. In fact, I was talking this morning with two women who are working on the very hard problem of how do we increase the representation of women in the venture industry, which right now is astonishingly bad. In fact, when you look at underrepresented groups in the American population, the U.S. population, they are wildly underrepresented in the venture population. Right? The venture population is essentially a bunch of white men. I used to joke that when I got to be a VC, I was an incredible minority because I was under 6 feet tall, and that was completely true. I'm actually 5'4", so I was wildly underrepresented. But the really tricky question is, so as I was discussing this question, like how can we encourage an industry that has been astonishingly white and astonishingly male to have a broader view? The thing that I said about it that I thought was incredibly tricky in that context is that there's no real path to being a VC. There's no clear thing you do that will lead you to be a VC. There's no clear opportunities you take on that lead you to be a VC. Every VC I know has had some different path to becoming a VC. So how do you then say, okay, we really would wish that folks who are underrepresented in the venture population would be VC, so do these set of things? And the answer is, well, there aren't a set of things. So just to give you a sense of it, I'm at a firm called August Capital. It's a smallish firm. There are 5 partners in the firm. We manage a lot of money. It's a strange thing where a small number of people can actually have invested a lot of money. But we probably are currently managing investments of $1.5 billion. So a lot of money. That money comes from folks like universities and foundations, some what are called fund of funds that take money from other universities and foundations, pensions, etc. We just met with the YMCA pension. How many dollars do you think the YMCA pension has? Any guesses?
Millions.
6 billion. The YMCA has $6 billion they're managing for their pension fund, and they need to figure out how do we make a return on that money, and one of the ways they do that is invest in venture capitalists. And so we might manage the pension fund of folks who have worked in the YMCA. We might manage money from universities, etc. So we we have this fund, we have a permanent fund that we're investing out of. It's a $450 million fund. And so our existing investments that we just started making out of that fund will come out of that fund. We have other funds that we're still working on that are hundreds of millions of dollars. And in the end, my job is to say, okay, here's $450 million. How do I turn that into, at least $451 million? But ideally, the metric is, are you going to turn $450 million into $900 million? Can you double the amount of money that you've made? And to be truly successful, can you triple that money? Can you get them their money back and then 2x the money? And it turns out there are very, very few funds that manage to do that. A friend of mine who worked in a fund of funds that had invested in a lot of different funds between 2000 and 2010 invested in, I think he said 220 different funds. So there's a big range of funds, 220 funds. And he asked me this question, he said, so of those 220 funds, how many do you think had done 2x or better out of 220 funds? I thought, I don't know, seemed to me like, 40 maybe could have done that, gotten to a return that seemed interesting. Turns out the answer was 12. 12 funds got to 2x or better, which means that, that essentially 200 of them had not been successful, and some huge percentage of those 200 had lost money. So it turns out the venture business is an unbelievably hard business. It's a very subjective business. It's a business that involves a lot of skills. So what do you need to be a good venture capitalist? Well, you kind of have to understand technology, sort of. You have to understand business, kind of. You have to understand sales. You got to be kind of good at selling. You have to be. The thing I think is very most important is psychology. You have to be good at psychology. You have to understand people. I don't think people understand and appreciate how much this is about organizations and about helping teams get built and convincing new people to join teams, but you have to be good at that. You have to be lucky. You have to. So there are all these things that you have to be, and so how do you become a VC? Well, it turns out, in my instance, I grew up back in New Hampshire. I can tell you that's not a good way to become a VC. That was misstep number one. I went to college and I majored in computer music. I'm pretty sure that's not a good step to anything. But it was awesome, super fun. I went and got a master's degree in criminology. That is certainly not a good way to become a VC, although, in fact, it's not really a very good way to become anything, to tell you the truth. And then I went to law school, and you know what? Going to law school is a good way to become a lawyer, and not really become a VC. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I was a lawyer in New York for 3 years. As a litigator, I was helping big companies get sued and sue people. And after 3 years, my wife basically said, look, this job is kind of bullshit. You're working all the time. You're not happy. It's not really a path to happiness. Here's a piece of advice I give all the time, whether you feel free to ignore all advice given. But at the time I looked and I said, all right, here's my boss, right? My boss at the time was one of the best litigators in the world. He was truly an amazing guy, and he was one of the best paid litigators in the world. He was making multiple millions of dollars a year doing this job. And I looked at him, he was as successful as you could be, working with the best possible clients, making the most possible money, and I said to myself, do I want his life? If I were successful, would I be happy in his life? And I said, no, I do not want his life. And when I came to that realization, then there was really sort of only one choice, which is leave, move on. Like if you don't want your boss's job or your boss's boss's job or your boss's boss's job, then don't stick around unless it's helping you get a set of skills that you're going to go so you can go somewhere else. And even then, what I would argue is don't stick around anyway, because life's too short to do things that you don't like. And particularly to do things you don't like in the name of doing something in the future you think you might like. So I left my law firm in New York. I talked with a set of friends who have different jobs. One was at Microsoft who said, hey, come work at Microsoft. Another one was a writer in LA. He said, come be a writer in LA. That struck me as insane. And then another one was a lawyer. He was actually my law school roommate. And he said, hey, David, why don't you come represent startups here in Silicon Valley? I had gotten a little bit lucky, or maybe a lot lucky, and in my freshman dorm in college, I just had my 25th reunion this last weekend. So 29 years ago, when I showed up at college, in my freshman dorm was this nerdy dude named Jerry Yang, and Jerry and I became buddies, and there were a group of us who were all friends, and when Jerry finished up with college, he moved on to doing a graduate degree, and in the middle of his graduate degree, he decided to start a company. It was called Yahoo. And so Jerry started Yahoo. He hired a bunch of my friends to be the management of his company, despite the fact that Jerry and his friends knew nothing. And you know the rest of the story on Yahoo. It turned out to be an amazing business. Jerry's now a billionaire. Many of my friends did very well. I didn't join Yahoo. Although I sort of thought about it at that point, but I did join the law firm that was representing Yahoo, because my friend Steve was there, and he said, look, startups are interesting. Why don't you come work in this? And at the time, I have to say, I really wasn't that interested in startups. I didn't know what they were. I didn't know what startup law was. I thought corporate law was evil. I came from a long line of socialists who thought that corporations were evil. But I kind of like technology, and so I ended up interviewing and decided to come join this this law firm, and start representing startups. And then I met, and I didn't know what the job was going to entail, but as I said to my friend Steve, how hard could it be? Which is always a great way to get a job. It seems easy. And I started representing startups, and I was amazed at how awesome startups were. Like, I was blown away. I started working with these young founders who were doing amazing things. Now, mind you, it was a little lucky because I joined in 1997. And 1997 was just as all these first-generation internet companies were getting going, and they were amazing. And the founders were young and smart and energetic, and so I just became completely addicted to startups. I stopped sleeping, literally stopped sleeping. I was probably pulling 2 all-nighters a week for a year. My last year of practicing law, I pulled 2 all-nighters a week. I was billing an unbelievable number of hours, and in every instance it was because I wanted my companies to be successful. I wanted to help them be successful. And the best way I could think to do that was to be really fast and work hard and get them the stuff they needed. And in that context, I was representing a bunch of companies, and one of those was a company called Evite. And we've probably all gotten an Evite at this point. At the time, it was a new young company. I started working with the founders. I loved the founders. The founders were two students that started the company while they were still in college, and they left college and they continued, and they got funding, and I was their lawyer, and I was at all these board meetings, and I was kind of a loudmouth. And I'll tell you what you're supposed to do when you're a lawyer at a board meeting. You're supposed to take notes. And I'll tell you what I did. I would say, have you ever thought about this? Or you should fire that person. Or, I just said crazy stuff that I had no business saying. And in one of my companies that I was representing, I said these crazy things, and they fired me. Which, that was like, what do you mean you're fired? They're like, the VCs in the room are like, who the fuck are you? I was like, that's a fair point, but I was saying good things. They're like, they don't care. You're fired. But in this company, Evite, they're kind of like, oh, that's a reasonable question. That's a good question. Why don't we think about that, etc. And my now venture firm had invested in this company, and 2 of the partners were on this board, would show up, and they got to know me. And over time, they'd say like, David has interesting things to say, and he knows a bunch of people. I wonder if he'd be a good VC. And so after one of the board meetings, I was in the parking lot chatting with them after the board meeting, and the guy who founded the firm, this guy Dave Marquardt, who is the best venture capitalist you've never heard of. He was the first and only investor in Microsoft. He was the first investor in Sun and Seagate and Xilinx and Compaq, and he just had this string of multi-billion-dollar outcomes. He sat on the Microsoft board for 33 years. He probably made more sitting on the Microsoft board from the stock he got doing that than almost any venture capitalist has ever made being a venture capitalist. But Dave said to me, have you ever thought about the venture business? And I said, yeah, that sounds interesting. Seems like an interesting business. Meanwhile, thinking in my mind, like, yes, please. Please let me be a VC. And then they interviewed me for 4 months. Met, like I sat and had lunches and dinners and met with them and all this stuff. And I thought, like, this is ridiculous. And finally, they offered me a job. Hey, David, we're willing to make you a VC. Lawyers suck at this. You'll probably fail, but we kind of like you, and we can't figure out a reason not to hire you, so we're going to hire you. And why don't you be a VC? And that was 15 years ago. And so I show up at the venture business saying, like, oh, now I'm a VC. Now what? Like, what do you do? And so I literally had to then kind of figure it out because there is no manual, and truthfully, there's no particular way to do it. And so I just sent out an email to all my former clients, said, hey, by the way, I'm a VC now. If you or your friends want to be funded, you should let me know. That was step one. And I said, oh, and by the way, tell all your friends. I'm open for business. And that, luckily, then I started meeting with companies. I started going to conferences. I started getting engaged in the tech community. I met a ton of people and started seeing what it meant to figure out what it was to pitch me your business and how can you be successful and all these things. So all of your points about like how can I be successful with a venture investor and how do I figure out who that VC is, how do I know who to pitch and all of that, I had to learn it in real time. I had to figure it out because there was no path to it. And in fact, I think it's kind of funny. As I became a VC, I said, gee, I don't actually know anything about business. I have a computer music degree, a criminology degree, and a law degree, none of which qualifies me to do anything other than law. Certainly doesn't qualify me to do business. To do business. So I was all set to take an executive MBA, and as I was thinking about it, a friend of mine asked me to co-teach an MBA class with him, and so I ended up getting appointed to the faculty at Stanford Business School, and suddenly I was teaching in the business school, and so I just didn't think like I could possibly take business school classes while teaching in the business school, or it might undermine my credibility as a teacher. And so that was the end of that. I just had to pretend I knew what I was talking about. And I've done that for 15 years. So for 15 years, I've pretended I know what I'm talking about. And it turns out that worked out, But I'll tell you, it's a hard business. I funded a bunch of companies over the first 10 years of my being in the venture business, and there's a saying in venture capital that lemons ripen early. And basically what it means is that the bad companies show up first. You know soonest when you've made a mistake because those companies run out of money and whatever else. So I pretty quickly had one of my companies crash and burn and lost $9 million. I had others that were floundering. And over that first 10 years, I did a bunch of deals. I tried to be helpful, all these things. And basically, I had 3 companies go out of business, and I lost something like $40 million in those 3 companies. And before becoming a VC, I thought that $40 million was a lot of money. And then you become a VC and people talk in millions. I'll raise 20, I'll raise 30, blah, blah, blah. But $40 million, I was in the hole. Then I had a set of companies, 3 other companies that I sold, and I kind of made about $70 million on those businesses. And so over the first 10 years in the venture business, I was plus $30 million. So I kind of made $3 million a year over the first 10 years, which made me kind of a mediocre VC. It didn't make me the worst by any stretch of the imagination. I was better than a whole lot of VCs by doing that. But my goal was to be the best VC, and I was looking at a lot of people, and I was not the best VC by any stretch of the imagination. Plus, here I am, plus $30 million, but I have another $100 million invested in a bunch of other companies. And if those go out of business, all of those go out of business, then I'm minus $70 million over, let's call it 15 years, right? And suddenly I'm losing $10, $15 million a year, and I'm an idiot. And they're idiots for hiring me and all this stuff. But then something awesome happened. It didn't happen overnight. I had funded a company called Splunk in 2004. I had met these 3 guys with a good idea. I thought it was interesting. I funded them to build a search engine for
What was the reason for turning down Uber? Or your main reason? Or Facebook?
My main reason, idiot.
Yeah.
No. So here's the thing, actually. I actually had backed, Travis Kalanick was the CEO. I had backed his last company. So I knew Travis well, and he came to me to pitch the business. Garrett Camp, who was his co-founder, I backed his last company. So it's unbelievable. I backed the companies that didn't work, and then I said no to Uber. The reason I said no to Uber is that when they pitched me, they weren't doing Uber X. They were only doing Uber Black. And I looked at Uber Black, and my partners looked at Uber Black, and we said, is that really a big business? Are there really that many people who are willing to spend twice the price of a cab to get somewhere on demand? And how big is this a problem in any other city other than San Francisco? And we came to the conclusion that it wasn't a big market. And we were in part right, and we were in part wrong. My guess is that Uber Black actually is probably a multi-billion-dollar business in and of itself. But once they figured out that Uber X was really the answer, then it just became a gigantic rocket ship of a company. And, it's the one that truthfully I sort of sit around rocking in the corner weeping about it. Because it's just, there's no reason I shouldn't have funded that company other than I'm an idiot. So brutal. But it's awesome. Anyway, so all right, so let's go back to, so now I'm a VC, I work with a bunch of companies. So back to your question, so how do you get the meeting? How do you choose who to meet? How do you prepare? All of those things, right? So first of all, preparation hugely matters, right? This is not the kind of thing that you just hop in, you just like shoot off an email quickly. It's not the kind of thing that you just go to a meeting quickly. You only get so many shots at this, right? And you don't just go to any VC. And if you do go to a VC, you better have done your homework about that VC. It is a ton of work. It turns out that everything about entrepreneurship is a ton of work. So step one is you got to build the beginnings of your company. And so you have to have some great idea, and you have to form a great team, and that's actually really, really hard, because where do you find co-founders, and you need to find people who are amazing at what they do and that you like and who like each other, and you have to come up with an idea that has its moment in time and that works and that someone else hasn't come up with, and all these things. But let's just assume you've done that. Like, congratulations, you've done that. So now what, right? Well, first of all, the way you get to a venture capitalist is through relationships. The way you get to a VC is through someone else. It is very, very hard to just cold email a VC and get a good response. I am one of the only VCs that I know of who answers every email he receives. And I read the emails, I look at executive summaries. I sometimes in a more cursory manner than others, sometimes very thoroughly. But the biggest thing that determines how I read that, how thoroughly I read it, how carefully, whether I give someone the benefit of the doubt, all those things, is who sent it to me. So if you send it to me on your own, without any explanation of why, then I will read it very quickly. I was about to say almost assuredly turn you down. To date, I have never, ever, ever in 15 years funded any company that came to me without an introduction. Now, that doesn't mean I won't. It just means that so far I haven't, which gives you a sense that the odds are crap. So now what's the next level? So don't just send it. Now, if you don't have a set of relationships, you don't know someone who knows me and introduce you, the next best thing is to demonstrate that you know who I am. And so your email should say something like, hey, David, I was listening to VentureCast. By the way, that's my podcast, VentureCast. You can get it on iTunes. It's basically me and my partner, Howard, rambling on about ridiculousness for an hour every so often. So you can say, I was listening to the latest episode of VentureCast, and you talked about XYZ kind of culture and startups, and I 100% agree with that. And in fact, my company has adopted these things. And so what it does is it says to me, you're engaged, you care, you listen, you connected what you're doing to the kind of piece of recommendation I'm giving you. And I have a blog, so you can go to Venture Blog and see what I think. You can listen to my podcast. You can see a bunch of videos of me on YouTube. Like, there are just all sorts of ways to understand what is important to me. The other way you can connect up is you can say, hey, David, I grew up in Hollis, New Hampshire, just like you. Hey, David, I play the violin too. Hey, David, I have 4 kids, just like you. Something that says, I have found out about you, I have a connection, and I want you to think about this. And so that's the next best way. The best way is to find someone who knows me, who can make the introduction. And the best way to do that is to find someone who is not an investor and convince them that what you're doing is interesting, right? Because you're going to need a bunch of advisors, you're going to need help from people, you're going to need help with having people think about your business. And so you're going to have to go through the exact same process. And you're going to have to reach out to those people and say, hey, Reid Hoffman, and Reid's a hard one because he's, but think someone in some company who's doing something interesting that might be valuable to your company. Hey, Jack, so-and-so, I understand, I've been following the great work that you do at Yelp. I would love to tell you about what we're working on because I could really use your advice. Ask people's advice. Oftentimes people are very happy to give their advice, and then while getting their advice, you can pitch your business to them. Here's how I'm thinking about it, here's whatever. What would you do next? And ideally they say, oh, I do this, I do that, and then they email you the next day, oh, have you thought about this? And suddenly they're getting engaged, and you get them interested enough in your business that you can say, hey, would you mind, I understand that you know David Hornick, would you mind introducing us? Do you think this is interesting enough that he might find it interesting, right? Those kinds of things will help you to find, also, if you get a great lawyer who's in Silicon Valley, is connected, or you get a great accountant, or, whatever, all of those connections are helpful, right? Because I have a set of lawyers I trust a huge amount, and if they say, hey, David, I like this team, would you mind meeting with them? I say, no, I'd be happy to. In fact, the way I funded Splunk is just that. A lawyer from another company I funded said, I got these 3 guys, I don't understand what they're doing, but I like them. Do you want to hear the story? And I said, sure, sounds great. I met the 3 founders and I ended up funding them, thank goodness, right? All right, so how do you figure out who's the right VC? Well, it's sort of the same thing as this question of you have to get to know how do you get to a VC? You got to pitch the right person, whatever. Well, the way you do that is that you do the research. You go online and you go to their website, you see what they say about themselves, and most importantly, you look at the companies that they've funded. You look at the firm and you see what companies it has funded, and you look at the individual and you see what kind of company that he or she has funded, and you then dig in and say, oh, is there a blog? Is there a podcast? Have they spoken on panels, etc.? And you do the work to find out, I'm doing a thing in IoT and Internet of Things. Here are some investors who have done IoT investments or have done related investments in connected devices or whatever else. And then when you write to them, you can say, I was excited to see that you've invested in Nest. I'm actually quite interested. It's quite related to the problem I'm trying to solve in IoT. Only instead of the thinking thermostat, I'm trying to create the thinking refrigerator. Right? Now there's a connection. You've gotten to the right VC. They understand. You've taken the time to figure it out. Like the worst thing you can do is send an email to a VC that only funds biotech startups with a software business, and vice versa. Right? So do the work to look and see what kinds of companies they funded, and those who funded companies that are like the one you're building are the ones you should be pitching. What else did you ask? Common mistakes. Maybe what to do before meeting a VC. So what do you do before meeting a VC? I sort of got to just kind of do the homework, figure it out, practice. Oh my God, practice your pitch. You really have to understand your pitch. It's your business, so you should understand it implicitly. Sometimes you get kind of mixed up in the process, whatever else. No, practice. Be ready to say, like, here's how I pitch the business. Here's how I think about it. You're going to be interrupted. A VC is going to say, so how do you market? And you'll be 3 slides away from the marketing slide. And if you know that, you can say, I'm going to get to that in 3 slides. And most VCs will say, great. Or you can say, hey, I've got a slide on that if you want to wait. Otherwise, I can hop to it now. But you need to know that it's going to be derailed, and you have to be ready to respond. You have to be ready to go, oh, I know the answer to this. Right? Here's the other thing. Never, ever, ever be reluctant to say, I do not know. Right? There's nothing worse than giving an answer to something that you don't know, and then having the VC know that it's not correct. And keep in mind that in any given year, I receive 1,000 business plans. It's getting dark in here. Hang on a second. Is that better? I receive 1,000 business plans. I meet with 100 entrepreneurs for an hour. I get excited about 20 of those companies and spend another hour to 10 or 20. I get serious about 10. I get very serious about 5. I give a couple of term sheets in a year. And so through that process, I learned a lot about a lot of things. And so oftentimes when you say, when I ask you a question, I know the answer to it. I'm just curious. I don't know how you're thinking about it, but I know about the underlying idea. I'm not testing you. I'm just saying, like, oh, how are you thinking about X, Y, and Z? And you say some things that aren't true, you lose credibility. Whereas if you say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is this, this, and this, and so my suspicion is such and such a thing, right? Or if it's a thing that you could know, then you say, that's a really good question. I will shoot you an email and give you the answer to it. I don't have it on the top of my head. There's no better way to gain credibility with an entrepreneur, with a venture capitalist, than to follow up with the things you said you would follow up on. It's amazing to me how often an entrepreneur will say, oh, I could get you that information, and then they don't. Like, really? Like, that's a terrible plan. So don't do that. And then other mistakes. I don't know that there are generic mistakes, right? It's very hard to make kind of generic mistakes. Mostly because entrepreneurs come up with new ways, new mistakes every time. And I don't mean that like critically, I just mean like every entrepreneur is his own, her own person. And so, someone could be super eloquent about the sales process, but know nothing about the technology and vice versa. You could have a lot of good answers about how you're thinking about financing, but then not have a good answer about how you're structuring the company or whatever. So, what I would say is, you need to be the expert on what it is you're doing. And that doesn't mean you have to come out of some area of expertise. You don't have to have been in Qualcomm and built these things and then go build it. You don't have to have been have the PhD in that thing, although that'd be lovely. What you do have to do is spend the time and do the work to be able to say, I understand the issues, I understand the players, I understand the things that will make this work or not work, and to the degree that one could be an expert in any of these things, I have done the work to do that. I've been going on a long time. Any new questions come up through that, other than the folks who suggested thoughts in the front end? Yeah. In the blue sweater.
Yeah, are there more criterias for gosh, I'm blanking. I was pausing on thinking on what I was gonna say. Criterias for the sorry, I'm blanking. Next person.
No problem.
Let me
Yeah, in the back.
figure it out.
Yeah, did you ever touch on whether you think there's a bubble going on in the tech industry?
Yeah, I did not. I met with one of my investors today, and she said, "So when's this bubble bursting?" So she clearly thinks there's a bubble. There are different kinds of bubbles, and the last bubble, the internet bubble of 2000, was a public market bubble. So you guys have no recollection of this, but what happened is every stupid company on the planet went public, and people bought these stocks, and they traded up to big valuations for no good reason. These companies were total bullshit, and yet you could take anything public, and so all sorts of people were putting their money into these dumb ideas, and then at some point someone woke up and went, "Hey, this is stupid," and instantaneously everybody went, "Oh my God," and they tried to pull their money out, and the whole thing collapsed. That's what happened in 2000. That was a mess, and it left us wounded for a long time, and there were relatively small number of companies that succeeded to bridge that gap. We don't have that right now. It's not like the companies are getting public. What we're seeing is all these private companies that, the unicorns that you referenced that are worth billions of dollars theoretically. Well, the problem is they're not really worth billions of dollars, and the only reason that they are is because there's this market that says they are, and here's this valuation question. Someone asked, so how do you come up with a valuation? We make it up. In the private markets, it's completely made up. It's not based on metrics. It's not based on, what's the PE ratios or any of those things that people pretend are how they make decisions in the public markets. I don't think they do there either, but at least they have some metrics that they pretend they use. In the venture industry, the answer is, I am excited about your business. I want to invest. You want $10 million, so I'll give you $10 million and I'll buy 20% of your company. And so if that's the answer, then guess what? It solves for itself. 20% of your company is $10 million means that the company is worth $50 million. Now, how does it go from 50 to 100? Because someone else says, I want to fund your company too, and I'll give you 60. And then someone else says, I'll give you 70, and I'll give you 80, and suddenly it's 100. So it's a private market. If there's one individual who's interested in funding your company, whatever price they choose, that's the price. If there are two, now it's a little bit of a back and forth, and the price comes out. If there are more than two, then you're going to get to some robust price that's based on people. And sometimes the price is, I can't lose a deal. I can't lose to you this time. I need to win this deal, so I'll pay an irrational price. Or I think this company is going to be super valuable someday. I need to get in, right? I mean, the fact that Uber is currently raising money at a supposed $70 billion valuation is monumentally stupid, right? I mean, there are almost no public companies worth $70 billion. So whoever's investing today at $70 billion is making a bet that Uber will be more valuable than almost every other public company in the world And in fact, in order for them to make twice their money, okay, I'll invest $10 million and make $10 million, the company will need to be worth $140 billion. And there are essentially no companies worth $140 billion. It's just insane. So is it a bubble? It's totally a bubble. It's completely moronic, but it's private. It's private investors who are all bubbly. And so my view is, shame on them. They get what they deserve when this thing pops. I don't think it's going to pop. I actually think it's just going to deflate. Companies are going to start running out of money. People won't think that they're worth what they're worth. I mean, right now, Dropbox is experiencing a lot of trouble, and it's supposedly worth $10 billion. Evernote is going out of business, and it's supposedly worth billions of dollars. I mean, there's just a ton of businesses that look like they were amazing. Instacart delivering groceries and losing money every time it delivers a grocery. So why is it worth $1 billion, right? So I think it's going to be a tricky time, but in the end, great companies will be valuable and successful. Yeah.
Is it possible for an entrepreneur to take less money than is offered? And if so,
Absolutely.
do you think that's a good idea?
There are plenty of times that would be a good idea. People almost never do it, but it's certainly the case that once you have money, I describe raising money as like it's sort of like a liquid that fills liquid that fills any space available. So if you raise $40 million, you will spend $40 million. Even if you raise 10, you could have built your business on 10, but if you raise 40, you'll spend 40. And so there are lots of good arguments to say, hey, I only need to raise 20, and I'm only going to take 20, and I'm not going to be diluted or whatever. But by and large, that's not what people do. They say, for a rainy day, and it's only a little bit of dilution or whatever, I'd rather have money in the bank.
So what criteria is the most important when you're assessing someone's concept? Like, is it strictly the return on investment that you're looking at? And obviously it's the intangible of the founder, but
Yeah, so I used to say that it was people. It's all about the founders. And it's still very much about the founders. You need to have great entrepreneurs who are super engaged, and how did you come to the idea, and why are you going to build this great business, all that. I now have seen that it isn't just the people, that the market that you're going after really matters. How big is it? How much opportunity? Is there a chance to build something gigantic here? And keep in mind, this is for me as an investor who needs to produce $1 billion in gain on my $500 million fund. So I can't fund something that isn't a gigantic company because I need to turn it into $1 billion in gain, right? Which is a near impossibility, by the way. I mean, I wake up every day recognizing that I'm on some fool's errand because it's like, oh my God, I just have to return $1 billion. Like, keep running, my friend. But so the market matters. So now I say people markets people. I'm looking for amazing people who are building something that is going to transform some big market. And what I missed about Uber was that it actually now has changed the way people behave. There are people who are not buying cars. There are people who will never take a taxi. I used to always rent a car when I landed at an airport, and now I go, why would I need to rent a car when I can just use Uber? So these businesses that transform and create new and big opportunities are amazing. And so so I'm looking at it, I say, is this a group of people with whom I want to work? Are they a great group of people who are cohesive and thoughtful and smart, and are the experts and all those things? And are they doing something that will transform a market to, maybe it's replace something, maybe it's build a new thing, maybe it's transform a market, but there has to be billions of dollars in opportunity. And those are unbelievably hard criteria, but that's sort of what I look for.
sweet.
And by the way, I'm almost always wrong, because it turns out that almost no startup works, right? I've now been in the business for 15 years, and in the 15 years that I've been in the business, I had Splunk, which was amazing. I had a second company, eBase, which we sold for $1 billion. And then I've had a handful of companies that sold for $1 to $200 million, and then the rest have gone out of business. It's hard. It's hard. And I mean that it's hard for you guys, not me. Like, who cares, baby VC. Entrepreneurs are doing all the hard work. I think it's unbelievable that you take on this, this task of trying to build something big and amazing, and you work. I have a friend who I funded who's been at it for 10 years, and it looks like the company's going to go out of business. 10 years, company grew from 0 million to 110 million in revenue, and then started declining and is essentially going to go out of business. That's just brutal. And yet I would back that entrepreneur again. I'm a huge fan of his, but he's looking at it going, oh, what a brutal decade I've had, you know?
I saw you were backing, I think it's Bills.com.
Build. There are
Bill.
two. It's stupid. There are two companies, Build.com and Bills.com, and I'm in the Bill one without the S.
Okay. So how did you find that one? Because I saw they're in like 35% of the top accounting firms and 3 of the top 10 banks, top 10 U.S. banks.
Yeah, it's interesting, and hopefully, it's it'll be one of the next ones. We'll see. So here's the path, actually, to give you a sense of it. My partner John was the earliest investor in Intuit, and lots of smart people came out of Intuit. One person was this young guy named Rene Lacerte. He was working on a payroll product at Intuit, and he said, we should create an online payroll service at Intuit. And the Intuit people said, no, that's not what we do. We have payroll service, but it's not online. He said, you really should. They said, no. He said, okay, I'm leaving. I'm going to create it. He left the company. He created it. He recruited people he knew, which included some people who were involved in other, who had been associated with Intuit. And so they reached out to my partner John and said, do you want to hear the story of PayCycle? John said, wow, this is super boring. David, do you want to hear the story of PayCycle? I said, yes, I do. I met with this guy, Rene. I liked him very much. He was for sure an incredible expert, and I backed his company. That company was called PayCycle, and it was the very first online payroll company. I worked with PayCycle. We sold that company to Intuit 4 or 5 years in for a little under $200 million, which was a good outcome. And Rene then went on to form another company, and that was Bill.com. And when he formed that company, then he and I had a set of conversations. I said, let's do this again, and I gave him more money. And so, in fact, what's interesting is 3 of us who have invested, 3 firms that have invested in Bill.com were investors in PayCycle. So we like working with Rene, and we think he'll build a great business. And it's looking quite interesting, but we'll see. And by the way, the attorney from PayCycle is the one who introduced me to Splunk.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Anyone else have a question?
I have a question. So for let's say a business that's starting up and they're looking to go long term with the VC, how else would they, besides just raising money with friends and family, what other path should they take, towards that climb, if they're planning to grow their startup into something long term?
To ultimately be a venture-backed business.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a relatively clear path, but the truth is, in that process, but the reality is that there are all sorts of ways to build a company. So, what I would say is, you first have to have a good idea, and you have to figure out how you can validate it. How do you say, is this? I think this is a good idea. How can I build the smallest possible version of it and get it in front of people and see if they like it, whatever that thing is. And by and large, that's usually done on your own dime. Usually, you do it on nights and weekends, or you have $1,000 in the bank and you use it, whatever. You put it on your credit card, whatever that is. And if it turns out that it is a pretty good idea and it seems to be getting some validation, it seems to whatever, then you go out and raise either a friends and family round or an angel round. So what's the difference? The friends and family round is literally what it sounds like. It's you reach out to your friends and your family and say, I have a good idea, can I tell you about it? I need $100,000. I need $200,000, whatever. And you say, you find the richest person in your family. You say, hey, what do you think of this idea? And you hope they like it, right? Now that's a treacherous way, because it turns out that if it doesn't work, you feel really guilty about having lost the money of your friends and your family. But it's a traditional way of raising money. And part of it is because your friends and your family are willing to give you the benefit of the doubt in ways that others may not. Or you can raise money from an angel. So what's an angel? An angel is just an early stage investor oftentimes it's people who have made a bunch of money in business before, and ideally it's in something like what you're doing. And so they say, I made a bunch of money, I really don't want to do nothing, I think I'll put money in companies and help you be successful. That's a great way. And now there are a bunch of angel funds. There's angel lists where you can list it and get a bunch of random people to invest. And there are angel funds like First Round Capital or Soft Tech VC or whatever. And they are basically like mini VC funds that are trying to fund super early ideas. So you go to those folks, raise some money. Now you have to validate that not only works, but there's a market. So you have to build whatever it is you're building, and then you have to like figure out what what to do with that. And if you can prove that it looks like there's a business here, then great. Okay, look, I've got a business, sounds good. Then you go to VCs and say, I raised $1 million to validate the idea. Here's what I've learned. Here's how it's working. And if I had 10 more millions of dollars, here's what I'd do with it. I'd fix the product this way. I'd use this money for marketing, and I anticipate that I'll get from here to here with that $10 million, and the company will be that much more valuable, right? And then you go through that process. And the ones that work raise an angel round, then they raise a Series A from a venture investor of $10 million, then it's still working and they need more money, and they go raise a Series B of $25 million, and then maybe they raise a bunch more money, maybe they go public, maybe they sell the company. There's no particular path. And by the way, it may be that you raise the first angel money, you raise $1 million, you sell a small portion of your company, you're working on it, looks pretty interesting, someone gets excited about it, and they pay $10 million for your company. Now, to me, you selling your company for $10 million is a bad idea, and you're not going to make a lot of money. And I just couldn't do it. But for you, if you sell it early, you may still own 60%, 70% of the company. In which case, you make $7 million. Like, that doesn't suck. I just think there are lots of ways in which you could build a great business without investors, without venture investors, whatever, and still be very successful.
My question just relates because right now we're looking for financing, but we're thinking about we're in the talks of working it out with maybe an angel investor that's locally here. But we're thinking about how that would affect it long term because of dilution, once we start giving out pieces of it, and then once we start jumping stages. So it's kind of like, okay, do we just finance it through like a Cabbage? You've heard of Cabbage Online?
Sure.
So we're thinking about just using the cash flows to borrow short term loans and then pay that back, versus going through an angel investor.
If you have a business that has cash flow that you could actually use the revenue of your business to fund your business, that's always better because you then control your whole business. So the problem is that, one, it almost never works out that way. It's incredibly hard to build a business that produces enough cash to pay for the operation. And secondly, you will likely at some point along the way think to yourself, you know what? I wish I could go faster.
Yes.
And that's when you raise money, because money's actually helped you go faster. So I have I have a simpleton's rule of thumb for this. And this is how I think about all finance, because I have no finance background, I don't know anything, I am the simpleton. But if you are going to raise, let's call it $2 million and sell 20% of your company, right? You have to ask yourself, with that $2 million, can I increase the value of my company at least the 20% that I just sold? Right?
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, then you are at least break even on that investment, right? And in all likelihood, it's going to increase the value of your company meaningfully more than that 20%, and therefore it's a good idea. Like, go for it. If you think that in order to raise $2 million, you have to sell 40% of your business, and you will not be able to increase the value by 40% with that $2 million, don't take the money, right? And the other thing I'd say is, as a general matter, I'd be much more worried about having the capital you need to build your business than about dilution. Great businesses, everybody makes a lot of money because it works, but the only thing that is fatal in startups is running out of money, right? You could have a bad idea, or you could slip, or you could hire the wrong person, whatever. But none of those things will kill your company. But running out of money, that's the end of it.
So going back to the example you said, I'd rather have like say 10% in 100 million versus 10% in 10 million, and just taking that into account with a venture-backed company. it sounds like what you just given me is just the idea is just to pursue that route, the venture-backed, loan or the funding.
Well, it's a stage-based thing, right? You have to demonstrate a bunch of stuff in order to convince a venture capitalist that you're worth $100 million.
Mhm.
And so often there are a bunch of steps you have to make before an investor would say, oh, I get it, that's what you're worth, right? Now you could do that on cash flow, it might take longer, but in the end, no matter what, you're gonna have to demonstrate that you're a sizable business in order to raise money at a $100 million valuation. You're gonna have to, you will either have to show monumental consumer growth without any revenue, or you're gonna have to demonstrate a business that has meaningful revenue. $10 million in recurring revenue, $12 million in recurring revenue, whatever, right? So it may be that the better thing to do is sell 10% of your business at a $100 million valuation, but you may never get there if you don't first sell 10% of your company at a $10 million valuation.
You have
And
time.
selling 20% of your company is not so bad after all.
You have
All
time.
right, last question. I
Yeah,
apologize,
last
but I have to run after this one. In the back corner, yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just wondering, are there any sort of similar traits or traits that stick out among the winners that you've had? And what are those?
Yeah, the answer is sort of yes and mostly no, right? I mean, I had this conversation with someone when I hit 15 years in the venture business, like, wow, you've been at there 15 years, so you must now understand how it works. I'm like, God, I wish. That'd be so helpful. I wish I understood what it took to choose that next one, because then I would stop not choosing the good ones and I'd choose the best ones, whatever else. But I will say that, look, you need passionate individuals. They need to be deeply engaged in what they're building. They need to be great salespeople. I've never seen a great startup come out of where at least someone involved isn't really good at selling. They need to be good recruiters. You need to be able to attract other people to help you build your business. There are a range of things that people need to be good at, and they all have to come together. And so to a certain degree, you kind of look at it and go, well, I know it when I see it, and then it turns out you probably don't even then. But my experience is that that great entrepreneurs are great salespeople. They're optimists. They think that they can change something big and important. They tend to be good leaders. People want to follow them. All of which is great. I mean, I can see in this room that there are a bunch of you who meet these criteria, right? First of all, you're here listening to a talking head on the screen, which means you've taken the time to do that. I appreciate that. You obviously are serious about this. You're smart and thoughtful, and you can go do these things. So it's sort of like so how does that differentiate us? But the reality is that you need to have this innate passion. You need to truly care to be successful about what you're doing and all that. And then you might get a shot at it. And and I will say entrepreneurship is amazing. It is I am truly energized by it every day. It's an astonishing thing. It is astonishingly hard. It is heartbreaking in many instances, all those things. When it works, it is magic, and it's hard to touch magic in our world, right? So I don't want to be anything but encouraging, but while being a realist, if that's possible. So I wish you all a ton of luck. And now when you email me, ideally through someone I know, and they connect us, you can say, hey David, by the way, I heard you talk when we had that that night, and so I did these sets of things as a result.
Alright.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. See ya.
Bye.